Good evening and welcome. Welcome to everyone here in church, standing 6 feet apart from your neighbor. Welcome, or almost 6 feet. Welcome to everyone in the infirmary and to people in Zoom land, especially to Nancy's family. I was told if you put the mic up or down, it stops the bad noises, so I'm trying. I hope that's better. We will begin the celebration of Nancy's life with the information of her biography, which will be presented by our archivist, Eleanor Craig.
In Granite City, excuse me, in Granite City, Illinois, in 1935, at the height of the Depression, Martin Joseph Finneran and his wife, Fanny Price Finneran, welcomed their 5th and final child and named her Nancy Jane. Before the end of the hard times, the family had relocated to St. Louis, where Nancy attended kindergarten at the Dozer School in the West End, moving on from there to St. Rose of Lima School through the 8th grade, and then to Loretto Academy on Lafayette. She graduated in 1952 with the final class before that school closed. There is nearly nothing in Nancy's file about her childhood in a family of 4 siblings, nor is there information about her parents except that her father died of lung cancer when she was in high school. But that she cared and was cared for in her family is evidenced by her closeness in her adult years to her mother and to Betty, Julie, Martin, and Tom. After 12 years of school with the Sisters of Loretto, it is not surprising that Nancy aspired to join them. She had worked for some months in the mail room of Scruggs department store, and then she arrived at Loretto in October of 1952 with a distinguished group of young women. Nancy was received on Foundation Day, 1953, the last year that reception and vow ceremonies were held on this date. As Sister Mary Gerard, she made first vows on May the 24th, 1955, and then left with her classmates for the St. Louis House of Studies, where 2 years later, she received her bachelor's degree in elementary education. For the next 14 years, Sister Gerard taught at Blessed Sacrament in Denver, Holy Cross in Deerfield, St. Mary's Academy, and All Souls School in Englewood, Colorado. At St. Mary's, she served a year as grade school principal. Then in St. Louis for another year, and again known by her baptismal name, Sister Nancy, she was among the earliest tutors at the Loretto Learning Center. She lived that year with the Loretto community at Visitation Holy Ghost, an inner city parish not far from where she grew up. Next, Nancy went to Louisville. She had earned an MAT degree in mathematics at Webster, and for a year she taught 7th and 8th graders at Loretto on Broadway. In 1973, and for the next 8 years, Nancy explored opportunities for more direct social service and political action in Louisville and the Commonwealth of Kentucky. When Network began in the early 1970s, Nancy trained as an intern, then served as their Kentucky coordinator for this national organization of religious women, which worked, as Nancy said, to make participation in political life easier for people. Nancy studied community development with other Lorettos at the University of Louisville, served on the Peace and Justice Commission of the Archdiocese, and created the Loretto Awareness Project for political and social advocacy in the Louisville area. She believed in collaborative organizations and purposeful action. A partial list of her active lifelong memberships include the League of Women Voters, the Civil Liberties Union, and NAWR. A year's respite at Mundelein College in 1981-82 allowed Nancy to investigate religious studies. At the end of the year, she composed a manifesto in the class she had had with Brian Swim and Matthew Fox. This is what she wrote in part. I want to say, I am here in this cosmos with a sense of play, of prayer, and of action in social justice. I come out of this year to challenge myself. This new day is one in which I will act out of my own convictions, with the conviction that I have the ability to act over and against our culture. If religion is to give voice to what can be, this is where I would like to put my voice. I would like to influence the what can be as equality for men and women, new diplomatic solutions instead of wars, and the transformation of our lives toward truth. For the next 30 years, the remainder of Nancy's working life, she devoted herself to work for what can be on behalf of the Loretto community. 14 years, she worked on the central staff as resource coordinator for the Loretto Justice and Peace Office. Then a dozen years at the United Nations as NGO representative and as a volunteer to support Betty Obel in the NGO position. Finally, for several years, again in St. Louis, Nancy served as a board member and volunteer with a group called Senior Connections. She was also a member of the Aquinas Club of St. Louis, whose goal is serving children of the world. The files of the Loretto archives are rich with the evidence of Nancy's contributions to a variety of Loretto's advocacy works. The Latin American Caribbean Committee and its accompaniment service, the Investment Committee, the sister community work with the Holy Family Sisters. Nancy wrote prolific reports and inspirational accounts of her interactions with peoples from around the world. She wrote in practical action terms, inviting Lorettos and many others to invest themselves in the affairs of our day. In a 1986 article in the Denver Catholic Register featuring Loretto's new Latin American Caribbean Committee, Nancy's remarks reveal both her practical approach to the work of social justice and her basic hopeful nature. She said, "Writing to your congressperson may sound mundane, but it's absolutely necessary. If people let the legislators know their feelings, it's pretty safe to say the vote in Congress will follow their wishes." In one of Loretto's many surveys of members' present and future thoughts, Nancy wrote this: "I don't think I separate my personal gospel and Loretto values. I would like my behavior to correspond to my ideals, but often there is a sizable gap. In liturgy, I would like to become a person celebrating, not a person at a celebration. I want to continue having time alone with art and writing, as I do now. I hope I'll be a nice person to be with, that in some way I can be helpful to others, that I continue for my lifetime being an advocate for important needs in society." Nancy died on Foundation Day 2020, the exact 67th anniversary of her reception as a Sister of Loretto.
This is a reading from the 2nd Corinthians. We believe and therefore speak, knowing that the one who raised Jesus to life will in turn raise us with Jesus and place you with us in God's presence. You see, all of this is for your benefit, so that the grace that is reaching more and more people may cause thanksgiving to overflow to the glory of God. That is why we don't lose heart. And though this physical self of ours may be falling into decay, the inner self is renewed day by day. These light and momentary troubles train us to carry the weight of an eternal glory, which will make these troubles insignificant by comparison. And we have no eyes for things that are invisible, but only for things that are visible, but only things that are invisible. Visible things last only for a time, but the invisible are eternal. For we know that when our earthly tent is folded up, There is waiting for us a house built by God, an everlasting home in the heavens, not made by human hands. And the response, Christ with me, Christ before, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right and my left, Christ when I rise, Christ in the heart of everyone who thinks with me, Christ in the eye of everyone that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. O God, Mother, Father, friend, beloved, Redeemer, Advocate, support. Excuse me. Grant us the grace to continually keep in mind what you mean to each of us. Let us reflect on I am the way, our constitutions. The vocation to be a sister is therefore shows itself in spirit of courage and generosity, marked by trust in God, ingenuity, and self-reliance, made firm by a personal response to God through the church. Vocational commitment includes lifelong development, a continuing process of becoming more human and more like Christ. We accept the responsibility to assist each other in understanding the gospel and in living according to its spirit and teachings. We work for justice and act for peace because the gospel urges us. The Spirit of God is not bound. It reveals itself in the lives of everyone. Even as we give to others, we acknowledge our need to learn from those to whom we are sent. As a community, we profess unshakable reliance upon God and human reliance upon one another. And now we have the opportunity to share some of our favorite memories of Nancy. We will begin here at the Mother House and then move out into Zoom land. If you wish to speak, it would be helpful if you'd come up and maybe sit in the front, one of the front seats, so we're not waiting a long time between. Sue Charmley.
Nancy, I loved coming over to St. Mary's with the guitar and being with you and the other members of the other residents there in the day room and playing and singing along. And you were always singing with gusto. And I'm going to miss that once we get to come back into the infirmary. But I have a verse here. It's called the 49th verse. Tao Te Ching. And I see Nancy in this. It goes like this. The sage has no fixed mind. She is aware of the needs of others. Those who are good, she treats with goodness. Those who are bad, she treats with goodness, because the nature of her being is good. She is kind to the kind. She is also kind to the unkind, because the nature of her being is kindness. She is faithful to the faithful. She is also faithful to the unfaithful, because the nature of her being is faithfulness. The sage lives in harmony with all below heaven. She sees everything as her own self. She loves everything as her own child. All people are drawn to her. She behaves like a little child.
Well, Nancy was one of these people that you never quite knew what she might say. And she had a great interest in many things. And I think that from her life, you could kind of tell that what she chose to get into, what she chose to try to add her own energy. And she did a wide spectrum of things. And yet she was very quiet and very faithful, both to her personal family and to Loretto and to any one group that she might be working with at the time. And people didn't always recognize the subtlety of Nancy's sense of humor. But if you watched her face carefully, well, when I could see, uh, you could tell what was screaming across it. And it was an indication of that gift, but also her intelligence. You think of the works that she got into and wanted to get into and did. It was a really wide group. And at the end, and then she's back in St. Louis, living across the hall from her older sister and very much with the family. But always there was an issue or something important that Nancy was pushing that was beyond herself. So it was a a delight to be with Nancy through the years, and to appreciate that kind of subtle humor, but also the gift that she was and the many things that she did.
Johanna Bryan. As I shared the other evening, Nancy and I parted ways after the House of Studies. I never lived with her or even near where she was, but we always touched base at times of assemblies and here at the Mother House on many occasions. I marveled at the works that she did, and she was always interested to know what I was doing. Some of my most tender memories of her are when I moved back here to the Mother House 3 years ago, and Nancy was moving around in the community at that time. We would go for long walks and sit down by the cemetery. She had very clear memories of childhood and could share many stories of school and the way it was. Some of my fondest memories are she would ask me to go to her room and visit her, and I would go there. And we didn't converse. That was the strange thing about it. She would just point at pictures she had drawn on the wall, and I would appreciate them. And then we would sit down, and I'd say, "What do you want to do?" "Whatever." I say, "Well, let's watch a little TV. Let's watch a ball game." "Okay. Do you want to be for Kansas City or do you want to be for Cincinnati?" "Oh, either." So I'd say, "Okay, you be for Cincinnati and I'll be for Kansas City." "Oh, there's a home run. Was that yours or mine?" "You can have it." And we would just, but there was such sweet peace there. No conversation, but just very, very peaceful. And I was just reluctant to leave. And I was saying, "Well, Nancy, I'd better go." "Well, okay." She'd say, "I'll walk you to the door." So a long hall all the way down to the front door. And I would say, "Now, can you go back to your room?" And she'd say, "I don't know where it is." And so I said, "Well, I'll take you back to your room." And so there were just such very, very dear memories. And all the way up to the end when I saw her in St. Mary's, it was that way. She had a very, very serene, sweet spirit. And I just treasure those times of closeness.
Pat Free. I was their classmate too. And I just remember a lot of things when I was in St. Louis that we would get together and go out to dinner or do something together. And it was always very relief. Anyway, Liz Perez had been going through some of her things, and she noted this paper that evidently Nancy had written when she was at Mundelein, because it was 1981, and it's regarding her capabilities. And she starts out with saying, "I am lovable and capable." And I don't know whether she wrote the rest of these or whether the other people put them in, but I'm capable, I have a capacity for delight and surprise. I'm creative. I visit people who need assurance. I like to explore, do the unexpected, unusual. I'm friendly, outgoing in a quiet way. I like artistic things. I beat out a good Beethoven. I'm shy, yet when I go into community to do public projects, letters, or take responsibility, speak at meetings and schools, I am well read and really digest what I read. And the last one, I like to party. Amen.
Sister Mary Peter asked me to read this for her. Nancy Finneran and I were friends since 1951, when she and several others came to join us in the novitiate. And then Mary Peter fast forwarded to 1995. Nancy encouraged me to go to China in 1995 and then to serve in the Loreto office at the United Nations. And only a few weeks ago, she shook my hand with me as we were leaving the chapel after Mass. Thanks, Nancy. Please wait for me when I'm ready to join you. With love, Mary Peter.
Are there any more stories from here? Okay. Who's on? Nicole? Do you
Yes.
want to get other people to come in?
If anyone on Zoom wishes to share, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself and then begin speaking. If you try to speak and someone else is doing so at the same time, please just try again when that person has finished.
Mary Louise, unmute yourself. Nicole, unmute Mary Louise, please.
All right, let me find her. Okay. Go ahead, Mary Louise.
Oh, okay. Well, I was thinking, I had the opportunity and the privilege really of working with Nancy on the administrative staff for a few years. And we would often start staff meetings with some kind of, warm up or easy thing or fun thing or something. And at one point we were all supposed to bring in our baby pictures. And then we were going to stick them up on a wall and try to guess who was who. So, we dutifully did that and put them all up on walls. And Nancy said, now, I don't have any baby pictures. We said, oh, Nancy. And she said, yeah, they told me they burnt up in the fire. And we said, oh, Nancy. And she said, well, then I found out there really was no fire. And so we said, oh my God, poor Nancy. We always had these poor Nancy stories. Another time, Nancy, we were going around saying, how do you feel? What are you up to today? Or how do you feel today? And Nancy said, now this will give you some idea. And then, she had that little smile she would do. And she said, yesterday I went to the laundromat and I put my money and my soap in one washer, and then I put my clothes in another. And we said, oh, poor Nancy, you know. So Nancy provided a freshness and a naivete almost in telling stories about herself. And I was privileged to work with her during those years. So thanks, Nance. See you later.
This is Rita Bergenhagen. I didn't know Nancy very well, but I did know that she colored when in the library at the Mother House. And one time I was in the dining room with other people and Nancy was putting napkins around on the tables. And someone said something to her about coloring. And she said, I had a happy childhood and I'm reliving it. I thought that was so profound for her to say that. And I've never forgotten that.
Um,
This is
Shall I
somebody
go?
else. Yeah.
Go ahead, Donna.
Well, first of all, it was really wonderful for you all to add the Irish music and prayer. Nancy loved St. Patrick's Day. It was a profound occasion for her, and she just gave the best parties. But one of the things that Nancy always did, and I think those of you, someone there, perhaps Marie, Nancy always wore a hat, a little tam, you know, and you might find one for her. I think she'd appreciate it. But lastly, it was wonderful to live with her in St. Louis. As it has been said, she was very smart, and I could never have counted the number of books she had when she moved to Kentucky, and the great discussions about which 10, we limited it to 10, which 10 she wanted to take and where the others could go. And you know what? She read every one of them. Every book she had, she read in terms of history and political science and sociology and politics and you name it. Nancy knew all about it. And the last thing I want to say is a word of gratitude to Cabrini, who lived across the street from Nance most of some of the years here in St. Louis, and was so thoughtful and so kind. Thank you.
This is Teresa Canale from Denver, Colorado. I met Nancy when we were in 8th grade on the basketball court, a game between St. Rose's girls team, basketball team, and Sacred Heart's team. Nancy was a forward and I was a guard. She had long legs and I had short legs, and she ran me ragged. We would make comments with each other and tease each other. And then a year later, on the first day of school at St. Mary's at Loretta Academy in St. Louis, we met, and she said, Shorty, I didn't know you were coming here. And I said, I didn't know you were coming here. We became friends from then on. We were friends for 71 years. We went all through the high school together, bummed around together, hung out at places, went to dances, went to ball games, did all kinds of things, stayed at each other's house. We then entered the novitiate together and were at the house of studies. We went on our missions out west, which we were thrilled about. I was in Wyoming and she was in Denver. So at different times when we would come down from Wyoming, I'd get to see her and visit with her, and we always had a fun time. Nancy was very, very intelligent, to my estimation, a woman of wisdom. She was meek and humble of heart. but she was tons of fun, and we had barrels of fun. We hung out in St. Louis in high school at Crown's Candy Kitchen on 14th and St. Louis Avenue, which really got to be our main place every time we came to St. Louis and we were there at the same time. We spent the day together and went to lunch at Crown's Candy's Kitchen. We'd always say we were going to try someplace different, but then we'd finally decide, well, where should we go? Well, let's just go to Crown's. And so we did that. And I have kept up with Nancy. I had the privilege of talking to her just a few days before she passed. We were in the same class. We celebrated together. We knew each other's families. And she had a humongous sense of humor. She was just fantastic. I will miss you terribly, Nancy. You've always been a model for me, and I hope I can live up to all the good that you have done and shown me the way. Thanks, Nance. May you rest in peace. I'll miss you, buddy.
This is Mary Ann. And what I remember about Nancy is a number of times of her putting me to work. She paid attention. And so she would say, you know, Mary Ann, you might want to come to this event at the UN. You might want to follow up on this committee. Maybe you could do something on this shareholder item. And then the last time, I keep saying it's the Optimist Club, but it isn't. Eleanor had the group right, the group that cares for children. And she was a very active member. They had breakfast once a month at Chris Pancakes. And so she asked me if I would come and talk about prisons, about solitary confinement, I think. But what it was, she was a valued member of that group. And each time it was seeing her in a different element, a different place, and you know, and she was putting me to work again. Anyway, I suppose she will. If we meet again, I guess that'll happen.
So, whoops. There's somebody who's going to speak. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Jordan. I'm Nancy's niece. And hello, Teresa. I just first and foremost, I would like to thank everyone that helped out with Nancy while she was at the Mother House. I knew that it was a place for her to be, and she totally enjoyed it. Every time that I spoke to her, she would tell me how well she was treated and how much she liked the meals. And I called her on her birthday and I said, hey, Nancy, do you know how old you are today? And she said, no. And I said, 85. And she said, 85? I'm 85 years old? And I said, yes, you are. And we'd always end our conversation. She would always say, thanks so much for calling. And thanks for thinking of me. I'll miss you, Nancy. Okay.
Anna, do you want to go now?
I can. I'm sort of shy about going because I think that there are so many people who knew Nancy so much better than I did. Nancy was a little bit of a mystery to me, but I did enjoy the times that I had with her. But really what I want to say is how precious these times are for me, because there are always people in the community who have wonderful stories that I've not heard, or things about people that I didn't know. And it just fills me with such a deep appreciation for who we are and what we have.
I'm Therese Stawawi from California. I was a classmate of Nancy's at Loretto. And Nan, if ever there was a creative friend, you are it. If ever there was a humble friend, you are it. If ever there was profundity in my friend, you had it. How hospitable you always were to me. I can so remember when it was snowing, like everything. The streets were so icy in Denver. But there you were at the airport. In New York, when I came to see you, you were at the airport. We always had so much fun together, didn't we? And remember how we always tried to get your sister Julie to give us ideas for our classroom activities, because she was the wonderful window dresser for so many stores. I can just go on, Nan, but I remember every time I would come to see you, you would always say, "Do you have to go? Do you have to go now?" And I always said, "I have to go, but I'll see you soon." And now this time, Nan, I'm asking you, did you have to go? I will miss you, but this time I'll be at the airport looking for you, and we'll both have our wings, won't we? Thanks.
I first knew Nancy at Broadway, and is when she and Liz McMullen were starting the middle school in the basement of the convent, which in itself is an incredible feat. Nancy was just plain fun, and it was a fun community. And when I forget who said, Joanna, this sense of play, I think that was absolutely what she was about, and it was subtle, and the look in her eye was subtle. But just loved life. And I was just thinking, I have a couple little things that she gave me a million years ago, and I will always have those. One of the real strong memories for me and most grateful memories to me about Nancy was when I moved to Denver, and she was in Denver, and she was in that little tiny house behind the house near Loretto Heights. On the anniversary of Emmanuel's death, she would always call me, and we would get together and have a lovely dinner. And I just always appreciated that she was bringing that piece of Louisville via El Paso for me into Denver. Nancy was just amazing, I think. Just a real light and real gift. And I'm grateful she was in my life. Can't get my mouse to work here. Sorry. Come on,
Regina. So there were so many surprises I had in, as Eleanor read the story of Nancy's incredible life. But I was personally pretty shocked that she had a math degree, because my friend, the Finn, could not balance her checkbook. It was not a gift that God gave her. God gave her many, many gifts, all of which she cultivated beyond words. However, when I look at Nance in the casket, that is as peaceful as she always looked every time I saw her. And a real sadness for her was when she had to quit dyeing her hair. She really liked her hair. But thin as it was, I think we talked about thin hair the other day, at Anne's memorial, Nance always had a very stylish thin hairdo. Um, and I think we have said how much she loved her family. And as much as she loved Betty, Julie was so special to her. The pain she suffered when Julie died was, I mean, Julie died too young and it was very hard. But what a what a woman the Finn is. And I will carry her with me. And as I look across the screen, there are so many of you that I know worked with her. And each and every one must have a million stories of your life with her. But to her family, thank you for letting us love the Finn, because Finn, you are so loved.
Kathleen Vonderhart, I was told that you might like to speak. I can unmute your mic. If you'd like, go ahead.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I would like to talk also to the family. Yes, she loved her family. And when Julie died, Nancy was so sad that she wasn't there. And so we went back to see where she was buried. And we found the cemetery, we found the grave, and Nancy wanted to take a picture of it for Betty. And so it was too drab. So she went around to other graves and picked out the best flowers and put them on the grave and took the picture so that she could give it to Betty. And she said that she was not going to let again, that she was going to be there for Betty for all the time that Betty needed her. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to tell you, if you wanted to get her started talking, ask her about her childhood. And so she explained that she so loved her sisters and her brothers, but they were off at school, and she desperately wanted to go to school. But she was 4.5, and in St. Louis she had to be 5 by September in order to get in. So Nancy pushed her mother, and her mother said, okay, the public school has a kindergarten. She was enrolled in the kindergarten, and about 3 days later, she said to the teacher, when are we going to read? And the teacher said, that happens in first grade. And so Nancy said, well, then may I go to first grade? And so behold, it happened. Nancy went to first grade, and I don't know that she told her mother right away. But when her mother found out, her mother said, well, in first grade, you can make your first communion. And so let's transfer you over to the Catholic school. Well, the Catholic school, I think, was St. Rose's, and they said, yes, we would welcome and have her train for first communion, but there's no room in the first grade. They put her in the second grade. Nancy went from kindergarten to second grade, and she was very proud of that. Now, I haven't been down to see the Nancy laid out, but there's a rosary there, and I hope that's her mother's rosary. She, when she was in Denver, she lived next door to me, and there was a cat burglar that got in. And I'll make the story short, but when she came home from the staff office, the police were there. They had taken fingerprints, And they said, tell me what is missing. And she said, well, the only thing I care about is my mother's rosary. And so that was that. And about a week later, the police officer was called to another place in the neighborhood because the cat burglar was found climbing in another window. And so they went, and when the young man came out, the police officer said, what did you do with the rosary? And the man pulled the rosary out of his pocket, and the rosary was returned to Nancy. So Nancy had a great love for her brothers and her sisters. And she told me all about when her brother was going to have a surprise party, and he didn't know it, but all the children were coming in a limousine, and she was just so excited. She had great love. At Christmas time, she wanted to get them all gifts. And one year she got everybody a different pair of shocking socks. And that was our playful Nancy. Very bright, very playful, very thoughtful, very gentle. And here, she always, with the nurses, said thank you. There are many stories, but I've taken up enough time. Thank you.
Hello to everyone. I'm Nancy's niece, Kathleen Finneran. My father is one of Nancy's brother. His name is Tom, or she probably called him Tommy. And I think that's Cabrini who just spoke and told those stories. Is it not?
No.
No? I'm sorry. It's hard to see some of the faces on the screen, but
it was Kathleen von der Haar.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kathleen von der Haar, for sharing those stories, and especially that story about the rosary, which I had never heard. And I'm eager to relay it to my father, who unfortunately can't join us on this technology, but we'll be sure to have him watch and listen to the recording, because I know, as I am, that he is going to be so very moved by all of your testimonies and stories about his sister, my aunt. I had never heard the story of her going instantly from kindergarten to second grade. And many of you are familiar with our family, and many of you may be only familiar through Nancy's stories, but we are a family who tells a lot of stories, and so it's quite remarkable to hear a few that haven't been in circulation. So I thank you especially for that, Kathleen. And I thank all of you for who you were in Nancy's lives and who she was in your lives, and the experience that my siblings and my cousin have been allowed through her affiliation with Loretto's, through her place in the Loretto's, that we've been able to visit the Mother House several times in our life over many periods of years. And it's always been a special time for us to come and spend a weekend there and be with her and be with all of you. It's such a special place in our lives. I had the pleasure of living in New York for around the same period of 12 years that Nancy lived there, working for the UN. And we lived quite close to each other. We both lived on the lower side of New York for a while before she moved up to Harlem. And as some of you might know, you can spend a lifetime in New York and never run into anyone you know. And many, many times I would be on a bus in various locations in Manhattan, not near where we lived at all. And the bus would stop and Nancy would get on. And it always felt somewhat miraculous. And we never quite understood how that coincidence, that miracle could have happened. But I just wanted to tell you all thank you so much for this memorial. It means the world to me, and I'm sure it means the world to my siblings who are online and my cousin. And I'm so eager to report back to my father. And Teresa Keneally, I'm glad to see you. We haven't met, but my father was so touched that you reached out to him. And thank you for that. Thank you so much.
This is Barb Light from St. Louis. I was with Nancy for a year in the novitiate and also a year in the House of Studies. And I really did not get to know Nancy very well at that time. But when Nancy was getting ready to move to the mother house, I spent a lot of time with her. And I was so grateful for that time because in that time, I recognized Nancy as one of the most selfless persons I have met. It was just amazing. She just never ceased to amaze me. And I was just very, very grateful for that time.
Would anyone else like to share?
This is Marie at the Mother House, and it seems we may have come to the end of tonight's stories, but the beginning of many more stories about Nancy. And tomorrow at 10 will be the prayer service before the burial, depending on the weather. The prayer service will go on. So we say, we give you glory, thanks, and praise. Oh, bless our works and guide our ways. Glory, Gloria, we give you glory, thanks, and praise. Go gently, Nancy. The other door.